Thank you. Hi, I'm Troy Dayton. I'm the CEO of the ArcView Group. And welcome to Deep Green Festival, and welcome to this panel. I'm psyched to see that such a high percentage of the people that are here are actually here, because there's actually another panel going on over there, which I imagine is pretty full too. So maybe later we can see who's got more spirit on either side.
There we
go. This is such an interesting time to be part of this movement and part of this industry, and it's amazing, being here last year at Deep Green and then being here this year, and what 12 months can do in this industry versus almost any other industry out there. It's a whole new world all of a sudden, and so this is a really great time for us to have this panel discussion and to get a chance to hear your thoughts and your questions and move from there. So I thought the way that we would start is just to do some introductions and to give each of the panelists a chance to just sort of talk a little bit about their background and sort of their sort of thesis in this movement, what they're all about, and then kind of just do it more like a discussion, including our own questions and your questions, and see where we end up. So I'll start. My name's Troy Dayton, CEO of the ArcView Group, and I started in this because I thought it was crazy that anybody would be put in prison for putting something so benign into their body, and just got really active from that standpoint. And whenever there wasn't an activist job around, I thought it would be good to get involved in entrepreneurial work. And so I had some experience during the .com boom and during the green tech boom, building startups there, and then kept getting called back to activist work. And I always thought that I always had to choose between poverty and making a difference in the world. And so that was what I thought the choices were. And then lo and behold, a few years ago, it seemed like we had been making some real headway and building a real industry where you wouldn't have to make that choice between poverty and changing the world. And that was when I thought, maybe there's an opportunity here to merge, the entrepreneurial work and the and the political work. And I noticed that there were all these people that were donating money and making money in the industry, and how much they needed the political work in order to survive. And I was raising money for the Marijuana Policy Project at the time, and just really noticed that there was a lot of people that wanted to invest in this industry but didn't really know kind of what to invest in. And then there were also people who really needed investments but didn't know how to really talk to investors. And so that was when I started talking with Steve D'Angelo from Harborside Health Center about an idea that I had to kind of bring these two things together, and he had some of the same ideas at the same time. And so we started the ArcView Group, and now we have an angel investor network where investors that are looking to make investments in this sector, in the ancillary parts of the business, the parts that don't actually touch cannabis directly, come together, and then businesses that are looking to raise capital come together, and we bring those two groups together to hopefully result in some serious investments. Oh wow, that's really loud. I wonder if we're as loud over there. Okay. Oh, okay. All right. Cool. And I'd say that my basic thesis in this movement is that, look, if we really want to learn from history and learn from the situation that we are in right now, it's that if you want something done in this world, you need to figure out how to make it profitable. That's what has helped the environmental movement so much. They figured out that, wait, if we can make money on renewable energy, then we can make it happen a whole lot faster. And there's tons of people out there that are looking to make a buck, and if we can help them make a buck by helping to get peaceful people out of prison, then everybody can win. And so I like to put myself right into the smack dab of that to make sure that we're utilizing everybody's interests, whether those be money interests or social justice interests, to affect positive social change. And so that's sort of my MO, and where I like to kind of put myself in the middle of, and hopefully ArcView is helping to achieve that. So that's a little bit about me. And we have an amazing panel here. To my right is Amy Poinsett from MJ Freeway, which has been doing just a remarkable job with point of sale and inventory management software in this sector, and definitely the largest company doing that in this sector, and has a pretty sizable chunk of the market. And I've gotten a chance to know Amy and her colleagues at MJ Freeway through their involvement with the ArcView Group as one of the companies that is seeking investment through our network. And so I'll pass it over to Amy to talk a little bit about what she does.
Thanks so much, Troy. Thanks everybody for being here today. As Troy said, my name's Amy Poinsett. I'm the CEO of MJ Freeway. We're a software company that serves only the medical cannabis industry. We create tools that are designed to help collective owners and growers maintain compliance with the state regulations or local municipalities, and as well give you the tools that you need in order to run a business. As Troy was saying, you can't provide jobs in your community, you can't keep going with your business unless you're able to be profitable and get the bills paid and make things happen. So our job is to give you tools that make it easy for you to do that, so that you can spend time serving patients and not a lot of time worrying about where did my inventory go and how do I need to manage my patient care better. And that's what we're all about.
Thanks, Amy. Next we have James Anthony, who is a lawyer for the medical cannabis industry, but before that was a city attorney, and so he was on the sort of the other side of this in many ways, and thankfully the dark side didn't keep him, and has been an amazing legal mind in this sector, but also an amazing activist, and really did a lot of leading of the effort down in San Jose to save the dispensaries there, and has been involved with law enforcement against prohibition, and is just all around a great guy with a really creative mind. And James.
Thank you. So I'm going to try to keep this down to 5 minutes, but we want to leave a lot of time after Aaron speaks to, as Troy was saying, have a free-flowing conversation with you. So I'm going to assume that if I asked everybody in this room, are you a drug policy activist, a cannabis policy activist, that everybody would say yes. I'm assuming that's why people get up before noon on Saturday after 420 and motivate out to the beautiful Craneway Pavilion. But let me just try to guess. How about this? I don't want to ask you to raise your hands, but sort of shift in your seat and sit up if you consider yourself currently actively involved in the cannabis economy. Just kind of sit up, perk up a little, right on. Okay, good. All right, good. All right. Thank you, I think. So what I do is I do local government. I do local politics. So obviously, as Troy's been saying, the drug policy world is full of these weird swirling tides and currents of politics and perception and media, and this happens at the international level. You saw recently where South America and Central America are really tired about the whole people getting their heads cut off thing. Is really not working for them, and they figured out that it's because people in America buy and use and consume a huge amount of illegal drugs of various kinds, and they have an economy that supplies that, and it's currently regulated through force of arms, violence, and governmental corruption, and they are over it. So we have that international tide swirling. National politics in the United States, batshit crazy. I think we can all agree. You know, never mind even the Republican Party. The Democratic Party, I think we can all agree, is nothing to write home about either. I deal with mostly local politics. At the state level, California seems to be dead in the water. I would say, though, to kind of contextualize California's 538 local governments, we are now getting towards the end of Obama's first term. And whatever your expectations or hopes or wild dreams and fantasies about that were, I think that the lessons of the first term of where we are now are very clear. Number one, small is beautiful. Okay? If you are the biggest whatever in the world, that's fine. Keep doing that. And if it turns into Oaksterdam University, then I have to assume that that's the plan, right? The movement plan, the activist plan, if you are the biggest whatever in the whatever, is to provoke an overreaction from the federal government. And I think that we're being somewhat successful with that. We haven't been successful up until now, but right at the point where Richard Lee is actually thrown in the back of a paddy wagon, wheelchair and all, on national television, we will have achieved something. And we're getting very, very close to that. The overreactions of the Obama administration are the beginning of the end, I think, for cannabis prohibition in this country. Especially to take such unreasonable positions at the end of the second term seems to me to set them up for a policy switch mid-second term. Now, maybe I'm an optimist. Anyway, if you are not the biggest whatever in the world, then my suggestion to you would be, and this is political advice, not legal advice. I don't do legal advice like this. You want legal advice? Come talk to me later. But my political advice is to stay small. Because I think what you're going to see is that local governments are very confused in California, and to the extent that they do anything that we can work with, it's going to be don't ask, don't tell. Those Oakland permits, I would be very, very surprised if those permits ever issue. Are there more places to buy marijuana in Oakland than the 3 or 4 licensed dispensaries? I suspect there might be. Officially, I wouldn't know anything about it. But if you haven't watched Casablanca lately, the old Humphrey Bogart movie, go watch that, because that's the world we live in now. We live in a world where, you know, it's not that the cops are literally being paid off, it's just that local government needs to know what's in it for them. And if occasionally they have to show up and say, oh my God, I am shocked to find that there is marijuana being grown and distributed from this location, then that might happen. And that was basically the attitude of OPD. You should have seen the Oakland Police Department officers at the Oaksterdam raid. Those guys did not want to be there. They knew they were wasting their time. They knew that they were on both sides of that issue, and all they wanted to do was to give the feds a little space to get their boxes of files and computers proving what? That cannabis was grown and distributed out of Oaksterdam? That took fucking 50 cops with guns? I mean, that shit is ridiculous, right? So, small is beautiful for now. If you can work out a don't ask, don't tell relationship with your local government and see to it that there's something in it for them at whatever level, do that. Finally, of course, all of those things I've described are impossible. So if you're not ready to get up and do the impossible 6 times before breakfast every morning, then you don't need to be in this. But if you're already in that, then I suspect that you know that. Just before I wrap up, I want to say, so what does happen with the second term from my optimistic point of view? And I think we're going to hear more about this, hopefully, from Aaron. Well, Colorado is going to legalize marijuana in November, and they're going to do it because you're going to help them, and the whole fucking country is going to focus up on Colorado. Yesterday, if you had sent $100 to the Colorado campaign, MPP would have matched it with 1,000. Now, did you hear that? 1,000, 10 to 1. I think you should try to push that today on the website. Email Rob Campia, email the Colorado campaign. Does anybody know what the website is for Colorado?
Regulatemarijuana.org.
Is that Colorado? I thought that was California.
I think they use it all. I don't know.
I don't know.
I think it's
isn't it Prop 64? Find the Colorado legalization campaign and give them money. Because when Colorado is the first state to legalize, that is going to have huge repercussions all across the country. Now, the last thing I want to say is that I truly believe, and okay, I'm probably a starry-eyed optimist, but I believe that California is going to get its act together at the statewide level. We have to support Amiano's AB 2312. ASA is working on that. Go to ASA's website, support 2312. Show up in Sacramento on May 19th to the 21st. There's a weekend in there where ASA is doing a conference and a lobby day. Go talk to Sacramento legislators. That's where we're at, and politically, and how that intersects with business on the ground where the rubber hits the road, town by town, county by county, is something that we can talk after we hear from Aaron.
Thanks, James. Next up we have Aaron Smith, who is the executive director of the National Cannabis Industry Association, and Aaron's been involved for a very long time had an organization working on safe access in California, and then became the head of the California effort for the Marijuana Policy Project, and has really just been in the thick of it in California for, 10 years now? And just doing an amazing job, and has put together the National Cannabis Industry Association, which is growing every month and really defending our industry on Capitol Hill. Aaron.
Thanks, Troy. Yeah, I got into this like probably everybody else here because I thought that it was absolutely abhorrent that human beings would be put into jail cells for using a product or an herb that's relatively harmless and in fact actually has medicinal value. I was a victim of the drug war early on in life and turned me into an activist before I even got out of high school. And while as Troy mentioned, we used to work together at the Marijuana Policy Project, and during those years, we watched the cannabis movement really shift into a new gear, where we saw businesses now openly providing medicine to patients, being regulated in many cases by their local governments, and a real, cannabis commerce was really starting to evolve here in California, and then in Colorado and Washington and other states across the country. So we, last year, or actually December 2010, started the National Cannabis Industry Association, which is a trade association that represents those businesses in the industry. Like any other industry, we are, it's almost like a chamber of commerce of cannabis, you might say. We're working on those issues in Washington, D.C. that are of specific interest to business owners. For example, reforming Section 280E of the tax code, which says that medical cannabis providers can't deduct any of their expenses because it's considered drug trafficking under federal law. Another issue that's pretty central to our mission this year is banking access. We're not only seeing the federal government conducting aggressive audits to the IRS and DEA kicking in the doors of these providers, but they're browbeating the Department of Treasury is browbeating banks to close accounts of legitimate state licensed or state legal anyway medical cannabis providers. So what I think is that this isn't really just an industry. We call it an industry, and it is an industry, but it's a lot more than that. Those providers who are providing patients medicine out in the open, by their very just by opening their doors every morning, are committing an act of civil disobedience. And whether you like it or not, if you're in this industry, you're on the forefront of a social movement that has been in place for at least 40 years in this country. And what that means is that you're an activist, and you, as a successful business, needs to build advocacy into their business model from the beginning, which means activating your patients so that they are educated on the policy, the state of policy affairs in their state or city or county, and turning them into activists. Because as a retail center, you have contact with hundreds of voters or potential voters, and that also means setting aside some money for organizations that are working at the state, local, and federal level to change the policy that criminalizes you. So that's what NCIA is about, is harnessing the energy and the resources that are being created in the industry to advance political change that we're all here to do. So I look forward to questions and comments from.
Thank you. So I'll start off with a question that should get us going. Is if each person can talk about one thing, one trend, or one company, or one thing happening in the industry side of this that they think is really positive, that's a really great trend, and one thing that they don't think is serving us that they've seen occurring in the industry.
I would say the biggest trend I've seen coming up in the last few months that is positive is the prevalence of medicine being tested. To me, that's just so important that, there's been such a prevalence in the past of a grower who's maybe not using the best hygiene in his grow room or whatever. You don't know what pesticides are on there, that kind of thing. And there's a lot of great companies coming up, giving fantastic results, letting patients have access to that result. We're working with a number of them to integrate test results into our inventory system. So on your receipt, when you go to your collective, it can say, go here and get results for this batch of medicine. I think that's wonderful. I think patients need to know that their medicine is safe and they're not inhaling contaminants without realizing it. On the negative side, it's not new, but unfortunately the banking crisis, as Aaron alluded to, is terrible. People can't get bank accounts, can't get credit card merchant accounts so they can accept credit cards from their company or from their patients without lying about what kind of business they're in, we get paid in gift cards for our service because a lot of our folks can't get a checking account or a credit card. And how can we all run legitimate businesses if you can't have banking services like any other business does? Any regular doctor's office, any bakery, any whatever is able to use above board banking that's safe and secure, but medical cannabis businesses, many of them have to have huge amounts of cash, which creates a security risk, and they're not able to operate in a normal above board fashion. And many people have tried to solve it. I don't know what the solution is because I haven't seen any progress that has really gotten traction so far, but it's one that I'd really love to see us all come together and solve because it's a shame for the people trying to run a business.
So I think the one positive trend that I see in California is a recognition, either explicit or implicit, that the immediate future has to be, like the president in the past, what has worked is decentralization. Oakland's failure to put up massive 100,000 square foot gardens is a very clear indication that the federal government will not tolerate centralized production. The one thing that we know about, the one thing we usually know is that big grows get busted. Now, there are a few exceptions which I don't understand, and Oakland is a land of many contrasts. However, I think that recognition by local governments is going to lead to either a continuation of the kind of confusion between what is state law and what can local governments do, which, as in San Jose, will allow us to just muddle along. In fact, at the point where some activists in San Jose are encouraging greater enforcement. The city just put out a report on its enforcement efforts, even on collecting taxes, which you think they would want to do, and they've been pretty lame. So you've got over 100 collectives operating in San Jose. It's very decentralized. The supply chain continues to be decentralized and invisible, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. And I think embracing that and dealing with the reality of it, of what does that mean at the local level, that there's going to be small patient grows, small collective gardens, feeding into a somewhat more visible retail distribution model, but again, not highly centralized in most cases, is critical. I'd agree with Amy that the federal enforcement strategy, which I guess they finally figured out has three prongs, will work in the long run. The IRS auditing collectives and anybody else who's visible, the lack of banking services, and the threats to landlords. Those are all viable, much more viable law enforcement strategies for the feds than just kicking in the door, right? Kicking in the door with cops doesn't work. They tried that. People just open up again the next day. But banks and the IRS and the landlords will work, and you can look at that as a negative, or again, being a starry-eyed optimist. I just see that that's just driving us further and further towards, and ultimately, the paradigm shift that will get us federal recognition and then flow down through the states into local governments, and we'll actually be able to do it. But until that happens, continuing to work in that environment in a don't ask, don't tell decentralized model is probably the reality for most cities, but it's going to really vary a lot. There are weird little swirls and eddies in every little locality where you are.
I think that one of the really positive things that we're seeing in the industry and in the movement is and I don't know if this conflicts with the don't ask, don't tell policy, but the institution of regulations, recognizing the legality of medical cannabis and recognizing the inevitability that medical cannabis is going to be sold in our cities and towns across the 16 states and DC, and that there's a need to regulate it like any other business. We see in Colorado, which has really driven the regulatory, or was in the forefront of the regulatory model, where you have 500 centers that are paying taxes and are licensed or at least have applications on file with a government agency that actually exists only to oversee the medical cannabis production. And I think that there's a reason that we don't see federal raids in Colorado. We certainly don't see local raids in Colorado, and if we do on the off chance, it's usually because that somebody was actually breaking the law by diversion of medicine or even worse things. But and I think that the Obama administration sees that having the state government buy-in to that point to where they're regulating, overseeing the industry is actually a huge threat to their drug war agenda, and that's why what we're really seeing right now is really a war on regulation. The federal government has stopped regulations from being put in effect in places like Washington and tried to stop in Rhode Island and Arizona. But really, if you look at the arc of we're really making progress. We're going to see 127, I think, dispensaries, state licensed in Arizona opening up this year. Rhode Island's coming on board. And I think that California with Americans for Safe Access and UFCW are working here in California to enact a statewide regulatory model like we have in Colorado. And I think that's going to be the key to getting the feds to back off, because now you have a state government that is frankly addicted to this industry because they're collecting licensing fees and taxes and accepting that inevitability.
Yeah, I would have to say that the trend I'm most excited about is the sense of inevitability that the whole public, everywhere I go in this country, there seems to be a sense of inevitability that cannabis will become legal. And the polling is going up as well, and there seems to be this just sense that even for people that disagree, they're like, yeah, I don't agree, but I'm sure it's going to happen, so I'll have to live with it. And that's kind of beautiful that that's the sense out there, because momentum counts for a lot. And eventually it starts reaching the politicians, and they start saying, okay, well, this is going to happen. I guess I need to figure out how to work with it. And that's a great trend. It's also a troubling trend. I mean, because it's yet another excuse to not be involved and to not make things happen. And if there's one thing I've known from being involved in this for so long, it's that things don't happen because people change their minds. Things happen because people do things with those changed minds. You have to get out there, and you have to donate, you have to pass laws. All of these things have been very hard fought and hard won, and as legalization starts to happen, that's going to have to be a hard fought situation. When I got involved in this, the most common response from people was, oh, what a great idea, but it'll never happen. And then they would tell me why it wouldn't happen, and they would be so right about why it would never happen, and I'd have to listen to them tell me why whatever I was doing was pointless. And now it's exactly the opposite, but the result is the same. The result is it's an excuse to not be involved. And so I just think that it's great. I mean, obviously, none of you out here are in that boat because you're here, and so. But I just think it's an interesting phenomenon, and it's something that I hope that as we get more inevitability, that we can continue to inspire people to be engaged and realize that every success will be a hard-fought success, and that things can always turn the other direction. Yeah. Let's see, second term sounds like a really great topic. Obama in the second term, predictions, possibilities, and peril, etc. Anybody want to take that, Aaron?
Yeah, I think James.
No? Here, how about this one? Try that one.
I think you mentioned this earlier, is that the administration is really overreaching right now, and that's going to provide, it's going to create public outcry. It already is, as we see, I think you said Richard Lee and other legitimate operators being shut down, especially in regulated states where, you now have state governments going to bat for these businesses. It's going to create the opportunity for them to change their policy because, they can rein in the Justice Department. And I think that's what the messaging that we need to use as we advance forward is it's not Obama changing his mind. It's Obama reining in rogue Justice Department and Treasury officials who are running roughshod over his current policy, which is to respect state rights. If we attack the president for, harming patients in a kind of an attacking mode, calling him out that way, it backs him into a corner to where he looks like he's changing his mind. But if the messaging we use is his Justice Department is running roughshod over his own current policy, it gives him an opportunity to, have the smackdown on the Department of Justice. And I think it's going to happen in the second term. Can't promise it. It's just it looks inevitable. We'll use that word again. That the policy will have to change as more and more states are coming on board. Even in Arizona, where we saw, we have extremely conservative antediluvian governor who just signed a law that said that conception starts before, or life is even before conception. Actually, she filed a ridiculous lawsuit to try to stall the law from going into effect originally. It was tossed out of court. She then said, well, as long as the feds don't threaten our state employees with federal prosecution for implementing the program, we'll move forward. And the feds actually did threaten her, and she had an out, and she didn't take it. And now the governor, actually in a couple weeks, is going to start accepting applications. The government's going to accept applications for dispensary licenses. So we're seeing kind of almost civil disobedience from some strange corners of the country, and there's no way that we can continue to have cannabis be illegal, or medical cannabis be illegal at the federal level with I think the cat's out of the bag. So, but that doesn't mean that we should sit back and just wait for it to happen. We need to get engaged. Everybody here should have already called the White House. If you haven't, do that Monday morning and complain about the raid in Amsterdam and the assault on medical cannabis. And those businesses that are in the industry, I estimate probably 20% are active or engaged on some level on any, those are the 20% that are here. But imagine where we'd be if the other 80% or just half of that other 80% stepped up and gave a little bit of money to organizations working on their behalf or activated their patient base, like those of you in this room are doing. Imagine where we could be. So it means that we need to be pushing harder, not sitting back and letting inevitability take its course.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to that. I think it's important that you do every little thing you can do. One thing that this movement is known for is that we have an enormous online presence. And so keep signing those petitions and emailing them to your friends. That's easy, kind of low commitment. You can do it from your phone. You can do it from your laptop. Keep doing that. Never, never, never let them forget that they are wrong, right? The federal prohibition on medical cannabis is factually and morally bankrupt. It causes unnecessary suffering. It wastes taxpayers' money, and it hurts people for no good reason, and they should know better. And when you should know better and you do something harmful anyway, my mother always told me that's a sin. We also have, as Aaron pointed out, this weird confluence of allies. They're all, Bob Barr from Georgia raving about states' rights and that states should be able to decide their own cannabis policy. Frankly, I never thought I'd wake up in bed with Bob Barr, but if that's what it takes on this issue, I guess I can live with it. I will say that the stated positions of the administration are absurd. The vice president said that, our little brown brothers in the South, they can talk about legalizing drugs, just because a few people are getting killed here and there. It's mostly not white people, as far as we can tell. But the United States could never consider legalizing drugs. Why? Why? Because it would create a large federal bureaucracy. And you know how the U.S. government hates any kind of large federal bureaucracy. So just completely, inane statements coming out of the mouth of the vice president, and the president didn't do any better. I mean, he said exactly the same thing. And then, I'm sorry, am I paranoid, or did they manufacture this whole Secret Service and hooker scam to like completely blow the cover on some serious drug policy discussion? I mean, that's bullshit. I don't really care who the Secret Service is sleeping with. I want to hear what the heads of state of the organizations of American states have to say about drug policy in this hemisphere, and somehow that got completely drowned out in the media. So if that's the best they can come up with, then I can only hope that mid-second term, they're set up to kind of, maybe a large bureaucracy wouldn't be so bad. There'd have to be some kind of tax or a sin tax. It's still America. They're still going to, we're still going to be bad people. Believe me, if you think that the president is going to hug a recreational cannabis user anytime soon, I wouldn't hold my breath on that one. But I do think Troy's point about inevitability both ways, both in terms of our complacency and our eventual getting somewhere, one ugly step at a time, because I do think it'll get worse before it gets better.
I'd add that, I'm sorry, we don't really need to have a federal bureaucracy to legalize medical cannabis, because, if you 99.5%, or at least initially, 99.5% or somewhere around there of arrests that are conducted for marijuana charges are conducted at the state and local level. So if the federal government simply descheduled cannabis and allowed states like California, Colorado, Arizona to move forward with their programs, the conservative backwaters like Arkansas wouldn't have to really change anything. Nothing would change for them. Now, of course, we want to see those patients there protected, but it would be a way to pivot without, in mandating that Arkansas set up a medical cannabis program. So I think that's probably the direction that we'll see, at least initially.
And you said deschedule.
Deschedule.
Right, not reschedule, okay? I'm not really interested in seeing cannabis on Schedule 2. That does nothing for me, really. In fact, maybe worse than nothing. So yeah, exactly. Okay, it's the choir out there.
Yeah, right.
That's nice.
Great. So I echo everything that James and Aaron have said. Only thing I would add is it's just so funny that we're just talking about what happens in a second term, as if the second term is inevitable. We could have President Romney, and that's a whole nother question. It seems like such a remote possibility that it's not worth really taking the time to engage in at the moment. But maybe somebody will ask that question and we can address it then. There's some real desire for that one. Okay, Romney term. I mean, hey, this industry was built under the Bush administration. This entire industry was built under the Bush administration. I was raising money from medical cannabis businesses during the Bush administration, and frankly, the Obama administration's kind of been worse than the Bush administration, and the industry's doing okay. So I think we'd be able to weather that storm. Because nobody's ever had a opinion of getting rid of this industry. It's just not really an option. Their only options are containment or support. So I think that's really key. Any other Romney thoughts?
I agree. I mean, it almost can't really get any worse than it is now as far as the federal government stance. And I think that if Romney wins, we shouldn't be very optimistic that he's going to make any changes, but we'll probably just be under the same type of regime that as it's been the entire history of this industry. And I think that there's only room but up. So. Yeah.
And I think you're right. You alluded to this earlier, Aaron. The states are addicted to this revenue stream, not only in terms of taxes, but also in terms of jobs that are being provided, build-outs that are happening, and construction workers who are being hired to do build-outs and security and all that kind of stuff. This is an industry that is helping in a bad economy. And I don't think states will be able to say, yep, sure, put the toothpaste back in the tube, no matter who the president is. I don't see it going away.
One more question before we start getting to questions from the audience is, as this industry grows, obviously there's some great things about having an industry. There's some great things about having the power of profit seeking and everything, but behind stuff. But we also have run some risks, right? I mean, we look at the alcohol industry, the tobacco industry, the pharmaceutical industry, and most people don't have the best associations with those industries. How do we, as Steve D'Angelo often says, how do we best marry the best ideals of activism and the best ideals of business in being a beacon for other industries, and how do we, how do we honor the responsibility we're asking the public to give us? I think it's a kind of a big question. I was curious what people had to say about the challenges and the opportunities there.
I think we're in some kind of twisted way almost lucky that this industry is born out of a prohibition era, because it's forced kind of community-based models and small cottage businesses to operate in this space. And I think that it's going, that because that's our root, will always be our roots. I'm optimistic that that is the direction we're going in. But the alternative to that would be something like the alcohol industry, and I would point out that still wouldn't be so bad, because even if you end up with one conglomerate or two, or I think in the alcohol industry it's 3 that have almost all the market share, you still have hundreds or thousands of small breweries out there creating craft beer for connoisseurs like myself. And so I think that we'll never see a monopoly in cannabis, because there are always going to be connoisseurs who are going to seek out higher quality or higher level of service, and then of course there's patients who are going to be seeking a more clinical environment to obtain their medicine. So I am optimistic that we're never going to have a Monsanto of cannabis.
I agree. The collectives that we work with, most of them, there are certainly some very, very large ones that don't have as close a relationship with their patients, and that works for some people. They like that environment. But many of the collectives are very close with their patients. They know who their people are. They know what kinds of issues they're dealing with, and it is much more of a very personal healthcare kind of relationship. And patients react well to that, and most of the collective owners that I talk to like having that kind of closeness. And I think there's room for both. And I think many of those collective owners got into this because they feel very passionately about the medicine. They're true believers, and they are bringing that activism to the both to activate their patient communities and to the business community.
Yeah, we could sit here all afternoon and talk about that question, but American culture and society continues to evolve in amazing and inexplicable ways. And certainly as the empire collapses and we descend into various levels of economic chaos, right, there is a permanent underclass in this country that is not going away anytime soon, which most of us are one paycheck or one harvest, however you keep your books, away from. So I do think that you're going to see more of those kinds of small-scale communitarian neighborhood projects, do-it-yourself projects, A, because they work, and B, because they're deeply satisfying for the human soul. The other things that continues to influence American culture and global culture, of course, is the proliferation of instantaneous communications everywhere, always on, all the time. I don't know how much time you spend on Facebook, but I think if you were to graph my personal habit, I mean, it's out of control. I need to know where all of my friends are all the time and exactly what they're doing. And that kind of changes, how I find satisfaction in my life, which then rolls back and has economic impacts. The third thing, of course, is drugs. There are just all kinds of fabulous drugs out there. Yes, marijuana is wonderful, and it should be free, and it should be allowed to evolve and mutate for medical and whatever purposes. But there are plenty of other drugs, too, that I think are having very interesting impacts on American culture. And as we shift towards perhaps, at some level at least, maybe state by state, a more open and accepting and experimental culture, it's hard to say where that could be in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. I mean, I don't know if you ever watch Mad Men. I don't recommend it. They're really depressed and fucked up. But that was reality for a lot of people, 30 or 40 years ago. And I don't know that it always gets better, but American culture keeps changing. And I think that we need to situate ourselves within that and be part of a movement